Hello, my crafty Kakana friends. Welcome to part 4 of our crochet lessons. You can find parts 1 through 3 on our YouTube channel for Kakana Public Library. And in part 1, I go over some basic stitches. Part 2, I teach you how to do some changing colors and how to finish your work. And in part 3, we did increasing and decreasing. So this is part 4 where I'm going to show you working in the round, which you might use in sweaters and hats and mittens, all kinds of places. It's a pretty handy skill to have. So I'm going to show you a couple different ways to start working in the round and how to count your increases for when you are working in the round. So in single crochet anyway, it'll be a little different if you're doing double crochet. So I have my yarn and a hook, and then I have a little impromptu stitch marker here. When you're working in the round, it's always going to be important to mark the beginning of your round so that you do not lose your place. It can be kind of easy to do sometimes. So I just grabbed a paper clip because that works for an impromptu stitch marker, and I just bend it a little bit so that I can slip it onto my stitch, but it won't go anywhere. So when you are going to make the very top of a hat, you're going to start with just a few stitches and then keep increasing until you have many stitches. So the main way to do this, and probably the simplest, is just to begin working in a chain. So I will chain 2, and now I've just got this little baby chain here. And what I'm going to do for single crochet is I'm going to work 6 single crochet stitches into this one chain here, right by my knot. So I'm skipping that first one that's still kind of attached to my hook. That one doesn't count. So we're going to work 6 single crochets into the very first chain that we made. Oops. And I work over my tail because it kind of secures it, and then I can also use the tail to kind of cinch the top closed when I'm done. So there we can see I have a tiny circle because when you put 6 stitches into one chain, it goes in a circle, pretty much no matter what you do. I can use that tail I worked over to kind of close that circle up. So I have like a little button. So now what I want to do is I want to increase so that I create a flat circle. So I want to keep my stitch marker handy at this point. I'm going to go around and continue working around in a circle instead of turning around. So you can see, here's my beginning chain. You can kind of see a loop of it there. We don't want to work into that. Instead, you're going to kind of look at the edge of your circle and to find your first stitch, which will look like a little V. So you can kind of see, here's the loop I want to ignore, but you can see this first V right here. So I'm going to insert my hook under. Now I prefer to do both strands. You can also just do the back strand, which has a cool effect too. But both strands is a little sturdier, and I like the tops of my hats to be sturdy. So I've inserted my hook under that first V. I'm going to pull up a loop and work my first single crochet. Now at that point, I'm going to stop for just a second and I'm going to put in my stitch marker because I just made the first stitch of my round and I want to know that that is the first stitch of my round. So I'm just slipping that paper clip in there so that it is marking that first stitch. So I won't lose track of it. But I'm going to be increasing. And when you're working single crochet in the round, you want to increase 6 stitches every round to keep it even. Well, we only have 6 stitches in this first round, so we're going to work an increase into every single stitch on this round. So I've done 1. Now I'm going to go back into that same stitch again to do my increase stitch. So there I have 2 single crochets coming out of that one, and I've got the first one marked. So now I'm going to work 2 single crochets in all the other stitches around and then stop when I get to my marker. So there's my first one in the next stitch, go back in and do my increase. Give myself a little more yarn here. Now back into the next stitch, increase. I'm just going to do that all the way around. Now if I'm counting to myself, one of the things I do in my head is I call increases double trouble. So when I do one, that's double. When I go in and do the second one, that's trouble. And that way, if I get interrupted by one of my kids, I can remember if I just said double or trouble, so I know if I need to make another one. But you'll probably come up with your own coping mechanisms for getting interrupted when you're counting stitches. All right, so now I have worked 2 single crochets in each single crochet around, and I've stopped because I've gotten to my marker, which marks the beginning of my round. And you can see that my little button is getting bigger here. So I'm going to take my marker out because I'm going to start my next round now. We're still not going to turn. We're just going to keep working in a spiral around and around. And I still want to increase 6 stitches. So, but now I have 12 stitches, so I don't need to increase in every stitch now. I'm going to increase in every other stitch. So for my first one, I'm just going to do 1 single crochet in that stitch. And I'm going to mark it so I know this is where I started. Then in the next stitch, I'm going to increase. So I go double, treble. Now I'm going to work just 1 in the next one, and then increase in the next one. So I'm going to do that all the way around. 1 stitch and increase. If you need a refresher on increases, that is in video 3. That's 1 stitch and increase. Now, if you have been counting correctly and you started with just a single crochet, you should always end on an increase. So this last stitch is always an increase there. So I know that if I get to my last stitch and I'm not on an increase, that I miscounted something earlier in the round and I've got to go back and find it. So we've completed another round. You can see our circle's getting bigger, but it still lays flat because we're increasing at the right rate. So I'm going to do another row here around, take out my marker. My first stitch is just going to be a plain single crochet. I'm going to put my marker back in. Now for this next round, we're still just increasing 6 stitches. It's always 6 with single crochet. So I'm going to just do a regular single crochet in this next one too. So there's 2 single crochets, and then I'm going to increase in the next stitch. So there's double and treble. And now I'm going to single crochet in 2 stitches again. So there's a plain one and another plain one, and then an increase. And then single crochet, and then single crochet, and then an increase. And I'm going to do that all the way around. Single, single, increase. My last set, there's a single, single, and an increase. And I'm back at my stitch marker. So you can see it's getting bigger quickly. One thing you might notice is that it's taking on a little bit of a hexagon shape. That's because we're always increasing in the same spot. If you want, as you get more experienced, you can stagger those increases to get a more perfect circle. It's a little bit trickier to keep track of when you're staggering, so for beginners, I recommend just going ahead and letting it be a little bit of a hexagon. Really, you can't tell unless you kind of accentuate those places. I mean, you can make it look pretty round. And so what you would do to turn this into a hat is you would continue kind of in this way. So in the next round, you do 3 stitches and then an increase all the way around. And the round after that, you do 4 stitches and then an increase all the way around. So you're always increasing 6 stitches. And you would keep doing that until the measurement of the circumference of your circle is the same as the circumference of the head you are trying to hat. So typical head size is between 22 and 24 inches. 24 if it's a larger head, 22 for a smaller adult head. And then kids sizes are obviously a little bit smaller than that, but not that much smaller. So you can measure around the outside of your circle, and once that measures pretty close to the same as the head you're making for, or an average size if you don't know who you're making for, then you would just stop increasing and you would continue to work around in single crochet only with no increases. And what that will do is it will start to make the tube part of the hat. And if you just keep doing that until it's a good length, you have a beanie. It's a nice, quick, simple pattern that you don't really need to follow in any instructions for, as long as you know to just keep working this regular increase pattern until you get to the right circumference, and then just work evenly until you're done. And then to finish off, there's finishing instructions in video 2 to finish your hat. I will quickly show you another way to start working in the round. This is the method I prefer because, like I said, that chain at the beginning gives you good structure, and you can use the tail to cinch it closed. And then when you're weaving in your end, you weave that tail around in a circle, and that top of your hat will never ever open. But a lot of people like to work into what's called a magic ring. And that also gives you a circle that you can kind of cinch up. But I find personally that the magic ring isn't as secure as working into a chain. I've seen the tops of hats kind of can open up. So when you're working into a magic ring, you essentially want to kind of make it just a big open knot, but with a nice tail hanging down, because that's going to be what you cinch from. And so what you'll do is you'll just start working. You'll insert your hook kind of into a loop of your knot is one way to do it. There's actually a couple ways. You can do it into a slip knot. Sometimes you want to maybe put if you want like to be working around a thicker strand, you can loop that tail over one more time. But what you do is you just have your hook through a loop of that knot and you make a chain to kind of secure it. So now you can see I have kind of like a lasso here, a slip knot that I can tighten, and then my chain is going into it. And then you would work your single crochets, your 6 single crochets into this big open ring, which is a little easier to see than working into a chain. So I think that's why people tend to like this method. So I've got my 6 single crochets, and you can kind of see it's still pretty open and loose, but I can take my tail and completely tighten it down. So you have your little button, just like we did at the beginning before. And then you would do the same thing. I would skip my beginning chain and I would work my increases in each stitch around. But then if you do the magic ring method, make sure when you're finished that when you weave in this tail, that you weave it very securely. Because it is a slip knot, it can stretch back out again. If it pulls on that tail at all, you'll start to see that middle of your hat opening back up and you get a hole on top of your hat. So it's easier to work into than the beginning chain. So that is its advantage, but its disadvantages is it's not quite as secure. So, but you can make it secure if you really, really tack it down when you're doing your finishing work. So that is how to work single crochet in the round. Double crochet is a little different only in that you use a different number of stitches. It's not 6 increases every time. But your pattern will guide you on that if you're following a pattern. Typically, I find hats tend to start in single crochet just because it is a little sturdier and a little bit more solid. So you get a nice warm hat. So that is how to make beanies. I'm hoping to make a lot of them this year. They're great for donating. You can donate them to warm clothing drives. You can make them for your Christmas gifts really quickly. If you're using thicker yarn and a thicker hook, you can crochet a beanie in the course of a movie. So, have a Christmas movie marathon, knock out all your holiday gifts in one weekend. So, that's a fun project. If you have any questions, you can always post them for me or give us a call at the library, and I'm happy to help. So let me know if you've enjoyed these crochet videos. And I would love to do a crochet along with you if you want to put some of these crochet skills to the test. I'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.